What's the future of currencies like the euro and the dollar? And will there be a third one, maybe a global currency, possibly a digital one?
Everything is moving toward the creation of a digital currency. If we speak in the language of conspiracies, a long time ago, I predicted that the dollar would change. And I saw that it would become something completely different from what we see today. And I couldn't quite describe it, but after September 11th, when the planes hit the Twin Towers, that was a pivotal moment. At that time, this digital version of the dollar, as I saw it back then, even though I couldn't fully understand it, was shelved for a very long time. And instead, we saw the slow rollout of digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, and the testing of the market. Now we're entering the culmination phase. The fundamental mechanisms of digital currencies have already been tested on cats and dogs, so to speak. And in the coming years, there will be a full transition by most major countries to digital currencies. After that, there will be a merging. These digital currencies will merge into more efficient blocks, just like the EU once united various national currencies into one. And I see that there will be about 3 major global currencies, similar to the dollar, the euro, and something else, along with around 10 secondary ones. These currencies will always be interlinked and will be tied solely to their private owners. All currencies will be privately owned.
Is that a good thing?
I think it's fantastic because governments are run by elected officials and unfortunately many of them behave like bureaucrats and politicians who hold no real responsibility for humanity as a whole. But when a private individual owns and is responsible for a currency, they're going to do everything they can to make sure it survives and thrives. Take some governments, for example, they try to hold on to poor because the person in charge is just a bureaucrat, not a businessman, and they start printing enormous amounts of money not backed by real economic output. That creates inflation and throws people into a state they definitely don't want to live in. But when we have regulated private currencies whose owners are committed to keeping them stable and viable, then governments will have no choice but to step up to adjust their economies in order to match the standard set by the currencies they now depend on.
But do you think there will be a single global currency at some point? Maybe alongside private currencies? Or instead of them?
I only see private currencies, that's all I see. Sorry, but I'm not speaking from logic right now. I'm speaking from the perspective of what I see when I look into the probable reality I'm connected to. Because ultimately, I can only speak from within my own perception of the world, my own values, and the vision where planet Earth evolves ecologically, and every individual is of value to society. There's a version of the future, or a script, if you will, where we worry and stress about the rise of digital money and technology and how they might be used to manipulate us, just like we've already started to see in China, for example, where a person's loyalty is measured by their loyalty to the ruling party. And when a party aims for total control and it's driven by inertia, not by real purpose, it starts forcing people to match its parameters. Parameters that are incompatible with real life. And when that happens, that society simply collapses. It self-destructs. We have to understand the key isn't controlling people. It's creating conditions that make people want to do something meaningful and enjoyable for themselves and for society. But when we lock someone into a rigid framework, we actually provoke either revolution or desperate acts, or they just give up entirely, resigning themselves to a fate that's been decided for them. And once that happens, they become useless to society because they've turned inert, just absorbing the directives of bureaucrats who often make decisions completely out of touch with the field they're dealing with. A clear example, which we all remember, was just a few years ago, when people didn't truly understand the mechanisms of how the human immune system works or how collective immunity functions, despite the fact that many medical professionals do understand this, decisions were still made by bodies not qualified to make them. And as a result, we ended up with serious health problems and mortality spikes. Like I said earlier, when governments are focused on staying in power, they often ignore how the economy works. They print piles of money, patch things up for the next election, and everything crashes, including them. It's like every next move is worse than the last, because they ignore the basic principle of playing by the rules of the system. It's like hopping onto a tractor and trying to race it on a Formula One track, and most likely we damage the machine, it would break down.
So what you're saying is, that's the most realistic scenario as of today?
I'm saying it's the one I would accept. Because any kind of digital currency that's artificially imposed on society will eventually lead to the collapse of that very society, the one that allowed itself to activate such currencies internally. And we'll see that clearly. If China doesn't begin a major restructuring soon, it might simply cease to exist as a state. And not because of any external interference, it will dissolve from within. That's what happens with alternative currencies. They're always directly tied to control, and the more control there is, the less interest, drive, and creativity remain in business. If everything is laid out too rigidly in terms of how things should be, on the one hand, it creates fear, and on the other hand, any initiative in dealing with paperwork ends up draining all your energy.
Seems like a really massive topic, because it's actually kind of hard to digest.
What kind of currency or money or energy of exchange would you personally like to have as a human being?
Well, there's this phrase in the question, global currency, a currency that could be used by literally anyone on the planet. You'd have access to it from anywhere, and you wouldn't need any kind of conversion to send money from the Arctic to the Antarctic. I'm not quite sure how to approach it. But if such a system has a single owner, or a group of private shareholders at the top, then, ideally, it should be deeply humane and as ethical as possible toward people. Or it could be that, in some kind of futuristic probabilistic reality, a collective unconscious will generate payouts for the use of this currency, rewards, and at the same time, give people options for how to manage it.
As you were speaking, I actually saw the answer. It has to do with the mechanism of how digital money is generated. Tell me, how is digital currency created today?
Mining.
Right, mining. There are servers that mine it. But what came to me while you were speaking is this. We, as humans on planet Earth, are part of the planet's ecosystem. We experience weather patterns, outbreaks of illness, even global conflict. And all of that correlates directly with the level of kindness and compassion humans are radiating. The more compassion, the fewer disasters, because that energy harmonizes everything. Everything is first formed in the noosphere, in the energy information field, and only then comes down into the physical world. We saw this clearly, for example, when the Tutsi people were wiped out purely through an information field with just a few radio stations broadcasting messages about what should be done to them. Many people absorbed that information, and over 1 million were killed, even without physical weapons. And then there's the other side of the coin. When we start using information streams to create a true, not false understanding of kindness, love, and humanity, that's when people enter a kind of positive inertia, do good and spread it. And if we create, and the technology already exists, a system where this currency is mined through a small device that tracks a person's inner state, their kindness, love, tenderness, compassion, this would operate on specific frequencies. It would measure levels of serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins, along with their overall health and interest in life. They'd be connected to a central system like a solar panel, and the currency would be mined based on that state. They could then use this money with joy. That would be a deeply ecological system for planet Earth and a reflection of that person's real contribution to making this place better.
That's exactly the kind of detail I was hoping to hear in your view of the world.
And that's why some grandparents, just by being kind to their grandchildren, to their children, or even to the flowers in their garden, can make the world a better place, more peaceful, more ecological, happier. And meanwhile, they'll have a little device that quietly generates millions or even billions for them, which they can then use according to their worldview. But because they're operating from a place of kindness, the effect will ripple out specifically within the area where this currency was generated.
I feel like the first part of your answer described the next realistic step we can expect in the near future. And my version, the one rooted in human qualities which you just spoke about, feels more like an idealistic future that we're meant to grow into. And that means the very foundations of life and values will shift first, and will no longer be judged by our productivity or efficiency.
Efficiency that applies to short-term, here and now performance in a professional setting, or to how well a person can create the appearance of something, even if it's based on false ideas. Because remember, a long time ago we talked about this, and I said, if we chose politicians based on how much love they could bring into society, into the community, into the world would change.
That's great, because so many people experience the same thing. In the market, the one who gets ahead is usually just the fastest, the one who grabs the tools first, cuts deals, finds loopholes, maybe even plays a little dirty. Meanwhile, so many truly talented people are just starting to build something long-term, trying to bring their spark to the world in a meaningful way. But imagine if we had some kind of super tool, something that could automatically evaluate, say, a person's hormonal system or state of being, and based on that, it would provide them with recognition or even resources to keep going. That would be incredible. A lot of people dream about that.
The principle here is simple. We start with birth, upbringing, education, and then higher learning. And I remember when you and I took that DNA test, the one where we sent in saliva samples. And they somehow mapped out my tendencies, my strengths. Some of them were hidden, but others I'd already begun to express and accepted them. And today, we already have all the tools to identify a child's natural strengths and potential from an early age. That's what brings them joy, fulfillment, health, and curiosity. And through that, an exchange of energy, which means possibilities and potential for society. If we approach each child individually based on their DNA and predispositions, then from a very early age, they can begin to unlock that creative identity, that inner God, that true self, and later go on to contribute to society in a way that's both authentic and effective. Because unfortunately, under pressure from parents, many kids are pushed into stable professions, and only much later in life do they finally break free and start doing what they were meant to do all along.